Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And today we're talking about minute 52, which begins with Thor and Jane talking about adventures and ends with them talking about bridges. Joining us today, as every day this week, is once again Scott Carelli, founder of Dueling Genre Podcast Network and host of Franchisography. And Scott, we found out that you're kind of a minute-by-minute emeritus at this point. What kind of got you into the whole minute-by-minute idea of approaching films?
Well, it was Star Wars Minute first and foremost. I think my podcast, Back to the Future Minute, was the third Movies by Minute podcast ever. It was Star Wars Minute and then Goodfellas Minute and then us, like a few weeks after Goodfellas Minute. I didn't really know. We didn't really know what we were doing at first, and we got the hang of it pretty quickly, and I really loved it. But definitely a thing in my past now. It's a lot of work doing a daily podcast, and there was a while where I was doing two simultaneously, where one would end and I would start the next one each season, just alternate between two shows, and I did that for 3 years, and that's enough.
And then you remember that sleep is a nice thing.
Yeah, it sure is. Oh, boy. Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you here where you get to just talk and someone else will do all the editing.
Yeah, great.
We'll have all your thoughts on this minute in just one moment.
Interested in chatting with like-minded Marvel fans over on Facebook? Join our Facebook group, the Marvel Movie Minute Podcast Executive Lounge. Just go to truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute and click on the link to join.
We were talking last time about the rom-comness, and I feel like this minute here is really kind of where we get into one more of the classic rom-com scenes, and this is where our two characters get to spend some time together, kind of opening up to each other. And we'll go through it like through the course of the minute, but let me just kind of start. What's your overall sense of this minute and kind of what's happening and how they're connecting?
I find this minute, I think the thing that struck me the most about it is how quiet it is and how very un-Thor-like it is now. Like looking back at this movie and I'm looking at this scene, it's like, wow, this is a really quiet scene of just like people talking in a car. And it just feels like the antithesis of what Thor has become. And that's not like a good or bad thing necessarily, but it's just interesting. I find it really interesting.
I was realizing this, I think, is the first time in the entire movie where Thor has been in a conversation where he's not the center of the conversation. You know, she turns it back towards him at the end, but he is genuinely interested in her and generally wants to know more about her and is putting the focus on her in a way that he never did with Loki, never did with Odin, never did with Warriors 3. Until now, every interaction he's had has been about how these people are going to be doing things for him or interacting with him. And this just genuine curiosity about someone else it's really nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like the way that it plays out. And as you're saying, kind of there is so much of this like rom-com element to their relationship, especially in the way that it's built very quickly. I mean, this whole relationship is built really over, a little more than a 24-hour period, maybe pushing into the 48 hours. It's not a long time that we actually are spending with all of them. And and just like in rom-coms, they have moments like this and scenes like this where they develop that relationship very quickly and the connection very quickly. We've already had a few moments where they, have those great eye contact moments that they're connected. And of course, she's hit him with a car twice. And so it all is like totally in that rom-com vein. But then when you have this conversation, it really allows them to kind of like have a nice conversation with each other, even if it starts off in this particular minute with Thor. It's like, is he kind of owning up to the fact that he's a player? I mean, that's exactly what it feels like when she's like, have you ever done anything like this before? And he's just like, gives that like incredibly kind of like cocky smiles like many times. I'm like, oh, geez. It's very funny.
I mean, I think part of it is he's getting his confidence back. He thinks for the last 24 hours or so, he has been, as you were saying, Scott, yesterday, the fish out of water. Now he thinks, okay, Mjølnir is close. I'm going to be back being Thor pretty soon. And I think that's a part of it. But especially at that beginning. But I do also think, again, another rom-com trope is the idea of the woman who most people don't understand her and most people don't pay attention to her. But then along comes this guy who is just fascinated by her and he wants to hear more. And often there's a kind of a little bit of a bemusement of like, oh, okay, that's kind of adorable, but also awesome. And that's very much what I see here. He's kind of like, he's not laughing at her. He finds her passion delightful and he like wants to talk with her more about it. And, it has a little bit of a kind of a, I'm sure there's no one else on your realm who's quite like this. This is kind of, you're the prettiest girl in this bar. But I do think there's some genuineness to it of he's captivated with her and he's letting her see that. And that's captivating to her.
Yeah. Cause I also just think that she's not used to that from anyone that she finds worth paying attention to, if that makes sense. She looks like Natalie Portman. It's not like she hasn't been hit on before, right? But I think most of the time it's kind of like in one ear, out the other with her because she's focused on other things. It's not until this guy who, looks like Chris Hemsworth, and is so weird and charming and interesting that I think that she's smitten, with someone who is paying attention to her. I don't think that's a feeling that she's used to feeling.
I mean, we've already established that part of why things didn't work out with her ex, who named Donald Blake, which is obviously an Easter egg, is because he didn't pay attention to the relationship. He was more interested in being a doctor than in a relationship. So, yeah, it kind of sets up that that's something nice for her.
Right.
We do also establish that, once again, she is just not a good driver. I kind of wonder why Eric and Darcy ever let her drive the van, because once again, she gets a little distracted and like there's just that moment of like she's on an empty road. She's not going to hit anything. But still, I thought it was funny that we get a third moment of her bad driving after her hitting someone twice.
Yeah, it's a very funny moment that they throw in here. But again, I think it's just to show how smitten she is. It's like I'm so drawn to this strange person who I just can't take my eyes off of. And oops, I'm driving off the road because I can't stop staring at him, And so it's like all of those little moments that they throw in here that I think, I don't think it's, another thing like, her running into him twice, but it definitely kind of ties into that whole angle that they're playing with here.
Yeah. It's also, again, another rom-com trope of like the clumsy workaholic,
Yes,
which is very much a rom-com trope. So
yeah,
right.
Well, and just speaking of rom-com tropes, and we also have like the moment in here where like he's looking at her while she's driving, and then she turns to look at him, but he's back looking out the front, and like kind of they're exchanging glances, but they're never quite looking at each other, and it's just like, oh, there's so many moments in this car, and like when he's like, she says, "You're kind of strange," and he's like, "Good strange or bad strange?" I'm like, this is just like, it's so much of this is just like, a Sandra Bullock movie. It just, I love the way that it plays here. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's kind of, one of the only, if not maybe the only sort of proper romantic Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Because even Thor the Dark World, like I wish we would have gotten the Patty Jenkins version that was like straight up just like a sweeping romance. I think that would have been a really interesting way to take this and evolve it from this movie. But like outside of this movie and this relationship, I can't really think. The closest one is like Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
But that's a very different vibe. That's more of like a Judd Apatow kind of like romance. It's, a little goofier.
I think the Spider-Man movies, the Tom Holland are but they're high school romance, which is a very different kind of a vibe as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of it because even like the Tony and Pepper bits, it's never played that way. It's never. We see the relationship evolve, but it's always kind of been there. It's never this sort of evolution of a romance that's actually building to something. What I do like about this, and we will kind of get this, even though it's never built as strongly as I wish it were. And to your point, Scott, like if they had really done that with the second film and allowed that to grow. I mean, think of how great that would have been when you have that moment when you have the fat, depressed Thor later who's, he's trying to talk about the ether, but he keeps getting distracted because of his love for Jane and how he lost her and all that stuff. Like that's all part of this giant romantic story that we have. And yeah, if they had really developed that, I think that those moments would have just hit that much stronger.
I do need to point out, especially because you're going to be talking about it in the next Marvel movie minute, there is another great romance, and that's between Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter. And we see quite a lot of that in the first Avenger, but it, of course, then becomes another romance. But you're right. I think for the most part, Marvel doesn't do romance. And generally, I like that because I think we've all seen a lot of action movies where the romance feels like it's tacked on in the 9th minute, just to have a romance. And I like that here they think, all right, if the romance is going to be a part of the story, we're really going to lean into it, just like they do with Steve and Peggy.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Wonder Woman I know it's totally, I'm crossing the line here by bringing it up, but I'm just trying to think of other superhero movies that really try to bring in the romance. And I guess Wonder Woman is the next one that would kind of come to my mind with her relationship.
Patty Jenkins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Superman and Lois Lane are pretty much the romance. I think the first Christopher Reeve movie is 100% a rom-com.
Yeah. So there's that. There's Bruce Wayne and Selena in Batman Returns.
Yeah.
It exists, but and of course, speaking from Spider-Man Minute, obviously Peter Parker and Mary Jane.
Right.
Yeah, but one of probably the last iconic cinematic kiss. I can't think of another one that is more iconic than the upside down kiss in the first Spider-Man since then. So we talk about that a lot on that movie. But yeah, in general, I just want more romance in my superhero stuff. I'm dying for a quirky romantic comedy like a Black Canary, Green Arrow movie. I just think I want more of that sort of thing. And so I really like this in Thor. I wish there was more of this going around in the superhero genre just in general, not just the Marvel Universe, but especially the Marvel Universe.
Right. Yeah.
And Birds of Prey does tell a great story about the romance between Harley Quinn and her breakfast sandwich.
Sure.
But yes, great. That's not quite the same thing. Anyway, if I can pull us back from this wonderful tangent. But yeah, so we're kind of deeply in rom-com land here. I think we've gone through a lot of the things in this minute. One thing I think was interesting, and Andy, you pointed this out in our notes, it's funny that this road isn't blocked off. And it's not really a road. As far as I can tell, this is probably just the dirt that was packed down first by them driving to this particular spot in the middle of nowhere. And then all of those people driving out to try to pull out there's been a whole bunch of people going back and forth. But it's funny that S.H.I.E.L.D. hasn't done anything to stop people from driving up now.
Yeah, I mean, there are dirt roads out, between ranches and across ranches and stuff. So I'm sure it's just some dirt. When we saw JMS, when he was as the townie kind of doing his first drive, he was just out on the road, probably going to check on something. I don't know, check on the cattle out in the farm out there or something. Who knows? But anyway, there are all these little dirt roads that kind of cut through these ranches out there. And so, yeah, I think it's just some dirt road that they're on. We see them pass there's fences and there's gates and things. So obviously there is civilization around. It's just, yeah, they're in this place. 50 miles west of Puente Antiguo is at this point, I guess, the middle of nowhere. But yeah, why doesn't S.H.I.E.L.D. erect or have a couple? All they need are 2 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents stationed at the head of the road where it meets the highway and just block it off and not let cars go on that road. That's all they need. I don't know. It strikes me funny that of all the planning they do, the simplest thing, and again, it's, we need to get Thor out there. Obviously, it's just all script reasons, but in context of what they should be doing, they don't do it.
So then, we have that kind of breakthrough moment and he's been saying all these things about her and she kind of looks back to him and says, who are you really? And he says, you'll see soon enough, with this again, kind of, it's the smirk, but now it's kind of moved from just being the arrogant smirk you want to punch to more of the kind of charming kind of perspective. But what's going on there? Why doesn't he just tell her? Why does he say, you'll see?
Because there's no way that she would believe it, not really. So, he could say, I'm Thor of Asgard, and she'd be like, oh, okay, I'm going to pull over and get the crazy person out of my car now. So, I think it makes perfect sense for him to be like, well, look, I'm going to we're going to go to this place. I'm going to pick up the hammer and then I'm going to have the power of Thor again and you'll see. So, you won't be able to not believe me when you see me shooting lightning out of a hammer.
I mean, to your point about the ghosts, I mean, that's exactly what it is. The ghost isn't say, oh, well, I'm a ghost. I'm Casper. It's going to say, well, we'll get there. And then we'll put it into a situation where you can't not believe it.
Well, especially because he's basically spent 24 hours trying to convince them and failing.
Has he been trying to convince them? Do you think that he has been? Or do you think that I guess I've never read it that way. Like he's actively saying, no, really, I am. I always just kind of assume that he's just so arrogant that he just says it and just assumes people think that. But maybe I'm misthinking that.
Well, certainly I think he's experienced them not believing him. He hasn't been trying to convince them, but they've locked him up for being a drunk or for thinking he's crazy or, any of these kind of things.
Right. Strapped him down, tried taking his blood.
And so then she says, well, but wait a minute, I still need some answers. And now he starts to kind of get into things. And he says, what you seek, it's a bridge.
That sounds like something out of like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I saw you had in the notes about this. Yeah, how does he know this? Why does he think she's seeking the Rainbow Bridge? I feel like a lot of her questions to him have been about, like, how were you in that thing? What was happening? And he's seen her notes about it. I guess to me, it makes sense that that's the thing he knows that she's most interested in is this, how did you get here? And so he's saying, like, it's a bridge. That's the thing you've been studying. What's your take on it, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, there's that conversation that they have. I think it's later in the movie, maybe it's earlier. The whole like science versus magic conversation. And I think that, he looks at her science stuff and he understands it all because it's rudimentary to him from where he comes from. And so, yeah, I think he knows exactly what she's looking for. And I think he's smitten with the fact that she's gotten so close and he's just trying to give her a little push of like, oh, you're thinking about the things that the bridge is made out of. I'm just going to tell you what it is. It's a bridge. And you're not seeing the forest through the trees,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you think about us trying to explain something like with our Wi-Fi to somebody from, let's just say 965 AD, Tunsgard, Norway,
sure.
We're going to probably have, I mean, even, we're going to have difficulty trying to figure out what are the right scientific words to use for them to understand it.
Right.
Because we're so far beyond anything that they would even understand. Like, where do you even begin?
It's an invisible carrier pigeon.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a kind of reverse. There's a reverse of that because Jane is kind of trying to understand that he doesn't get most of this stuff. He doesn't understand that pet stores don't sell horses. But then when she says bridge, she's like, oh, an Einstein-Rosen. As though that would mean anything to him.
Right.
And I kind of had a flashback to times where, like, not where I'm the one explaining, but we're on the other side. I've played guitar for about 20 years. I think I'm halfway decent. I really love doing it, but I've never studied it formally anyway. And every now and then I'll be playing, and if it's someone who knows jazz, they'll kind of be like, "Oh, I love what you did there. You took the harmonic seventh and it inverted it with the third and the and I'm just like, I don't know. I pressed the frets. It sounded good." Like, yeah. I don't know all the technical talk thing. And that's kind of, to me, like, she's like throwing in the scientific thing, and he's like, it's a rainbow, because right. That's what he knows.
Yeah.
One of the funniest lines. We only get half of it. It's so frustrating, but I love that reaction. What he says, it just plays so well in context of this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And just making him that much more strange, right? Making him strange, making him see that much more of the fish out of water, and she's just like she just doesn't know how to read him. When he's saying things like realm, like I that's what I love, the way that Portman is playing opposite Hemsworth here. Like, she really does play this. Like, I like you so much, but I don't understand so many of the things that you're saying and doing.
Right,
and he feels the same way.
Yes, right.
And that's why they're a perfect pair. They just have incredible chemistry in this movie and in the next one. I can't wait to see them on screen again together. I just think that they have amazing chemistry, especially Thor, now that they've kind of figured out what to do with him, like what direction they're going to take him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious how he now plays against Natalie Portman's character.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've said to Andy a couple times that part of why I was so excited to do this project is we're so perfectly placed in that we are coming, like, we started soon after the Loki TV show had happened. And so now it's like, okay, we get to go back to see Loki's origins, knowing all the places he goes to. And then, as you said, like, this is going to end, and then probably a couple months later, we're going to get Thor Love and Thunder, which is like the kind of culmination of the Thor and Jane love story that we're seeing here. So we're just seeing all the origin stories for what stuff that's coming out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much juicy stuff with the characters. And again, I think maybe I'm just so drawn to them because we are getting that romance. And it is something that I really do enjoy when I feel like there's a good romance built with characters that I like, and I don't feel like they were just added to the film just to have a romance. Like, that's what always bugs me when it's just like, oh, it's just the love interest that they have to throw in so there's somebody to save at some point. Drives me nuts.
And I think part of why I really like seeing this from Natalie Portman especially is, and I've kind of mentioned this before, but I'll go into more detail of it now. Like, as I've said, my first geek fan love is and will always be Star Wars. And I knew Natalie Portman was a great actress going into the prequels, and the romance between her and Anakin is probably one of the worst things about those movies, and that's already a very low bar. And I remember there was a lot of debate about, like, maybe she actually isn't a very good actress, or was it just the script and the directing? And I feel like movies like this, I mean, she had just had Black Swan as well, but even if you don't miss that, this is such, to me, clear proof of, like, no, if she actually has a good director and a good script, she can really sell a romance. And it makes me both so happy to see that, and then also just gives me like, oh, why couldn't we have this Natalie Portman in the prequels, you know?
Well, she would have had to have chemistry with her co-star for starters.
Also true. I know Hayden Christensen's coming back. Hayden Christensen is coming back, and so I'm just trying not to think negative thoughts about him for the Kenobi show. But again, we're in tangent land now.
Well, just on that though, I think he's another person who, when you put him in the right hands, I think he can do great things. I've really enjoyed him in some other projects, and I just feel like in the prequels, like, nobody was really served well, except maybe Ewan McGregor, who managed to escape.
I don't even think he was served well. I think he just persevered.
Yeah, well, maybe
I mean, I'll admit, like, I don't think even like Tom Hiddleston could do anything with a line like, "I hate sand, it's coarse." You know, like, I'll give you that. You know, Christian Hayden did not have much to work with either. Anyway, I can keep going on about the prequels, but it's not what our listeners have signed up for or what Scott asked to be a part of. So either of you have any other last things about this minute to bring up?
I just really wanted them to do like a meta moment where when Thor looks at Jane and says, "Oh, good Strange or bad Strange?" I want one of them to look into the camera and say, "Doctor Strange."
You know, with the power of online editing, you can probably figure out some way to do that. You know?
Yeah.
I'm sure I can.
Anyway, well, Scott, last time you got to tell us all about the projects you have done that are definitely worth checking out. What is Franchisography? What are you doing with that?
So Franchisography is basically my co-host Nick Jimenez and I's way of doing movies by minute forever, basically, but getting through a whole season in one episode. So the idea is we talk about Hollywood's biggest film franchises, a movie at a time, and we just go through and talk about every movie that's been released, and we talk about the development of the film, and we just sort of like try to add context to it, good or bad, you know, in terms of like, oh, this movie sucks. Well, why does it suck? Why were these decisions made? And we try to like do our research in the development process to figure out like what went wrong, what went right, that sort of thing, and add that context, and then discuss the movie and try and figure out what we like about it and what we don't like about it, while also painting a picture of the franchise as a whole. Franchises we've covered so far have been the Men in Black franchise, the Scream franchise, the X-Men franchise, which was a long one. That was 13 movies, and it was our entire summer, and it was so much fun. That was a really, really great miniseries. I think we gained a lot of listeners during that miniseries, so I definitely recommend everybody checking that one out. And then we've got Spy Kids that we're doing right now. So we're really like running the gamut in terms of like the kinds of franchises that we're doing. And on the docket upcoming, we've got what the live action films of Wes Anderson, which I say is a franchise because it's the same. It's the same stars every time. So and then we're doing the Matrix right on the other side of that.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
So yeah,
which will probably be about the time when these episodes come out. So that's perfect.
So it's going to be. It's a really fun show. We have a great time doing it, and we really, really do our research and try to bring as much context to the making of these films as possible. And we're having a ton of fun doing it. So that's Franchisography.
It sounds fantastic. And I know I'm especially looking forward to the Matrix one. On one of my own podcasts, Superhero Ethics, we're going to be doing some episodes on the Matrix when that new movie comes out. And it sounds like all my research I can do just by listening to your podcast. And so that's going to be great as we kind of dive into the ethical issues that it brings up. So, well, thank you as always so much for being a part of this. Andy, thank you for everything you do. To our fans, feedback from you is what makes this so awesome. So let us know what you think. Do you love the rom-com? Are there other romances in the MCU that you're really a fan of or that you're not really a fan of? Do you want to just get back to the fun fight scenes or whatever it is? Let us know. On the Next Reel website, there's all the great ways to contact us. And most importantly, though, we're so grateful for you listening in, and have a great day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.